Over the last couple of years, we've really been thinking about what contributes to a successful open data program or open data initiative for a government. And what we recognized is that there's not just technology, but an entire customer success methodology, which starts with a conceptual roadmap of taking your data on this multi-year journey. In fact, it's such a long journey, we call it a Data Odyssey. And what I want to do with you right now is take you through the concepts of the Data Odyssey so that you can start thinking about making your data more valuable to the audiences who you want to share it with. So let's get started. So it starts with data at rest in the underlying business systems. We call these the line of business or systems of record. These are the systems that you bought or built over the last 20, 30 years, and they are designed to capture and create and process data. But unfortunately, the data that sits under these systems isn't very accessible. It isn't very useful other than to a very narrow audience of programmers and DBAs and data scientists. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try to increase the value of that data along two dimensions. So along the x-axis here along the bottom, what we're going to do is take that raw data and assimilate it. Well, what does that mean? Well, basically what that means is we're going to enrich it and enhance it in order to add meaning to it. So you might think of structuring it, mashing it up with different data sources, ultimately taking something raw and making it more valuable over time and through more processes. And then along the y-axis, what we're going to do is we're going to broaden the reach from where we start with typically just programmers and DBAs and those with the kind of technical prowess and the security threshold to get into the underlying data store, to broadening the reach to as wide an audience as makes sense for the data that you want to share. In the case of public data, that's the consumer web. That's getting it out there literally to every single person who has access to the internet. When you're talking about internal data, what we're talking about here is broadening the reach of data to all of those government employees who should and could benefit by having better access to that data. So making it discoverable and useful to the government employees is important as well. So let's start the journey. So it starts with kind of the baseline, portals and dashboards. So here what we're going to do is we're going to take the data that you have in your underlying business systems, and we're going to surface it into what we think of as a system of engagement. You might think of this as kind of the baseline is a data catalog or a data portal. That's fine. It's a good starting point. And basically the experience that the data catalog or the data portal offers is search. We can now search for a data set by a few keywords, by type, by publishing agency, and find the data sets that are meaningful to us. What we're going to do next then is wrap each data set with a real simple application programming interface, or what's called an API. APIs are what developers and entrepreneurs need in order to build applications and services with your data. Then what we're going to do is make that data interactively explorable. So you can sort it, you can search it, you can filter it. You might think of it kind of as a spreadsheet of data on the web. Then what we're going to do is allow you to create some real simple visualizations with your data, turn it into a chart or turn it into a map so that you now start to provide some context or some meaning. You know, if you showed somebody a crime data set just as a spreadsheet, maybe not so useful. You show them the same exact crime data set now as a map showing crime by neighborhood, it's now more meaningful and more understandable. And then ultimately what we're going to do is help you take that data and surface it as dashboards that citizens can use to see how the government is performing and operating. So that's kind of phase one, portals and dashboards. The next phase then is data as a platform. So here we're going to take what we started with on portals and dashboards, but the way you should think about this is these are incremental steps on the journey. They don't replace each other. They build on the back of the prior steps. So we're going to take the portal and dashboard phase. Now we're going to layer on some enhanced capabilities and some enhanced value on top. So we're going to take those basic APIs and we're going to now make them custom APIs. So here in this phase, you might think of a crime API, gives you broad access into the entire crime data set for the entire city. Custom APIs will have individual endpoints for maybe homicide, arson, burglary, or maybe crime by year. Maybe you've got 2012 crimes, 2013's crimes, 2014 crimes. So different endpoints in order to give developers and entrepreneurs a easier entry into that data. We're going to see data connectors now. So the underlying lines of business systems will have connectors that get the data flowing from those systems into the open data environment. And you're going to see automated data ingestion. So here in the data portal and dashboard phase, it's largely manual upload. So every month you're refreshing the data manually. Here in this phase, you're automating the data ingestion. So it's either happening hourly, nightly, or maybe even real time, where every time somebody records a 911 call or a 311 call, that data replicates over into the data platform. You're going to see us evolve from kind of generic citizen-facing dashboards to custom user interfaces, custom reports, basically building a more tailored experience for your data so that it has more meaning. You're going to see the opportunity to combine multiple data sets in order to create new data assets that didn't previously exist. So if you're the if you're the Department of Transportation in the federal government and you want to combine weather data with railroad accident data and create a new data set that has that all as one, that might be useful for somebody analyzing railroad accidents to have access to the weather data in one data set. And then ultimately what we're going to do is allow the data to be enriched, enhanced, adding some structure, adding some meaning, adding some semantic qualifiers or tags in order for the people who are using that data to have a better understanding of what the data is all about. So the evidence of data as a platform, I'll share an anecdote that helps you understand this. So one of the customers who uses the Socrata platform is the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. So they, in 2014, built a new website called the Nursing Home Finder. If they had done this 5 years ago, what they would have done is they would have asked systems integrators to propose on building a nursing home finder, and the responses that they would have received back would have been a full stack. Multiple web servers, multiple operating systems, multiple databases, build out a custom user interface. It would have been high cost, high risk of failure, long time to implement. You know, this is kind of the way software was built for governments 3-4 years ago. But what now data as a platform, what Medicare said to their system integrator community is, hey, we already have the data set. We already have these nursing homes in a really clean data set. The data set has absolutely rock solid metadata, data that describes the data set. All of the locations have been geocoded. We have every column in there of all the kind of features of a nursing home. Is it in an urban setting or is it in a rural setting? How many meals per day do they provide residents? Does it have oncological care, or what other kinds of services does that nursing home provide? So this time what Medicare did is they said, hey, you systems integrators, all we really want you to do is build the user interface. Just build the web UI that allows somebody to come in and kind of crank the knobs and dials and gauges and find the nursing homes in the area that they're interested in that meet the criteria that they want. So they did that, the responses came back, and the result is, instead of this being a multi-year, multi-million-dollar high-risk project, it was a very short-term, low-cost, low-risk of failure project that was implemented successfully in record time. So that's data as a platform. All right, so the next phase then is getting data into a connected ecosystem. So here what we're going to do is, first and foremost, recognize that not everybody is going to a government website. So what we're going to do is try to get the government data onto the consumer web and into commercial products that make logical sense for government data to be incorporated into. So as an example, if you are a public transportation rider, instead of having to go to the government website and try to read on a very cryptic schedule of the bus schedule, why not put it into your mobile device where there's a great user interface that'll tell you not only the bus schedule, but also the light rail schedule and the schedule of other kinds of transportation systems in your area. We're going to enrich and enhance the data by wrapping first-party apps around. So these are applications created by Socrata. So today we've got ones like the Financial Transparency Suite to create literally a consumer user interface around your budget and your spending and your payroll and your contract data. We've got another one called Service Connect, where you can take your what's often called 311 data, your kind of non-emergency incident data, and present that in a just absolutely delightful consumer interface for your average individual to be able to navigate that government data. So wrapping those data sets with tailored experiences is an example of first-party Socrata apps. There's also a third-party app marketplace where if you think about a government, Chicago, New York, each publish more than 1,000 data sets. It's too much for Socrata to go after all of those and try to build all those applications. But the good news is, because the data is now in standardized form and because it is wrapped with application programming interfaces, any independent software vendor can now build applications around that government data. And because the data is starting to be standardized, they can start to port their application from city to city and county to county and state to state. So you're seeing a third-party app marketplace emerge around government data. As part of the connected ecosystem, we also really promote data federation. And so what this means is the flow of data isn't flowing just from one government to the residents and citizens they serve, but also from government to government. So here where Socrata is based in Seattle, sometimes I don't know if the data I'm interested in comes from the city of Seattle, from King County, or from the state of Washington. But through intelligent data federation, where all three of those organizations can enable, through literally 1 or 2 clicks in the admin console, the bidirectional federation of data from one to the other, that all of that data from all 3 publishing organizations shows up in the data platform for all 3 of those governments. So whether I go to the King County website, whether I go to the state website, whether I go to the City of Seattle website, it just shows up where I need it. One of the most important things that Socrata is doing in this phase of the connected ecosystem is normalizing your data. So if you think about every major city now publishes crime data. And if you or I were to look at the crime data, you would say, hey, it looks kind of the same. It's got records of crime, and I can see a crime type in here, and I can see the location of the crime. But the reality is, because the line of business systems that they started with were built independently many years ago, the physical structure actually differs from city to city, county to county. And so what data normalization is normalizing that data into a consistent form. So you can go into any city and you can now navigate the crime data. So this makes the data significantly more valuable, and it allows programmers to build applications with that data in a much more portable way than they've been able to in the past. Data normalization and data standardization, and another concept called data heuristics, allow us to build a data science-powered user experience. So think again back to kind of this phase, the portals and dashboard phase, where crime data would be presented on the web as largely a spreadsheet on the web. Well, here what we're able to do now with a data science-powered user experience is the data comes in, we apply some machine learning, we know definitively this data set is about crime. Well, when you're also working in a connected ecosystem where we now have access to see 75, 100, 200 cities of crime data, we start to see kind of the common patterns between those data sets. We know if the data set is about crime, somewhere in here there's going to be a location of the crime, a date of the crime, a type of crime. Was it homicide? Was it burglary? Was it arson? There's going to be whether an arrest was made. There's going to be the ethnicity of the perpetrator. There's going to be all sorts of information about each incident of crime. And so now what we do is when the data set comes in, we categorize it as crime. We look for those specific data sets. And we also know that each column within the crime data set has a ideal presentation mode. So the date of the crime, you probably want to show that as a time series. Is crime going up or going down over time? Well, in order to answer that question, you need to present it as a time series. If it's an address or it's a location, you probably want to see it on a map. You want to see crime by neighborhood or crime by city council district. And so the data science-powered user experience now changes the default presentation from a spreadsheet on the web to an interactively explorable, visualized query interface. So now you can say, I'm only interested in crimes in this neighborhood that happened in the months of June, July, and August between 9 a.m. and noon that were of type arson, and you can see that result very quickly. Really simple way to query data visually, all powered by data science and a connected ecosystem. And then ultimately, when data is normalized and standardized and aligned to open data industry standards, that's going to allow us to benchmark the performance of one city against another, and for cities and counties to be able to share and compare and cooperate around their data, much like they have been unable to do over the last 20, 30, 40 years. All right, so the final phase on this journey is getting the data into the network. And so, you know, the idea that Socrata has is actually that this data portal and dashboard phase is going to really kind of fade away into the background, and probably the only people that are going to be going to the portal are academics and researchers that for some reason want to see the entire corpus of data sets. Your average resident, your average citizen is going to go onto the consumer web. They're going to go to Zillow and Google and Yelp, and that's where they're going to use and access most of the government data. So we're going to see all sorts of interesting things happen when data is out there in the network. So you're going to see industry creation and job creation. So if you think back to over the last 10 or 20 years, the entire weather industry and the entire GPS industry, the satellite industry, all were formed because the federal government here in the United States started putting weather data and satellite data online, and now both of these are multi-billion-dollar industries. And you can imagine in the future, transportation data, health data, education data, sustainability data, these are all going to be multi-billion-dollar industries on which companies are created and jobs are created. Having all of this government data out there in the network is going to translate that data into an immense community asset. So now all of this government data is going to be where it needs to be, where people are making the smallest and biggest decisions that impact their daily lives. It's an enormous asset. You're going to see massive consumer applications built on the back of government data. So the one that happens to be one of my favorite right now is an application called City Mapper. It takes the public transportation schedules of every major city and turns it into this delightful application for Android and iPhone, so that whatever city I'm in, I now no longer have to figure out how to navigate the bus schedule. I can just use this great application. You're going to see third parties emerge who see this government data as the raw material that they can use to combine and enhance and mash up in order to create new commercializable assets that didn't exist before. So think about last year, Monsanto acquired a company called Climate Corporation for almost $1 billion. And what Climate Corporation was doing was taking the weather data and mashing it up and enhancing it with some other kinds of data sets and basically selling this to farmers to help them predict whether they needed farmers or crop insurance. So you're going to see more kinds of commercialized data assets emerge once data is in the network. With data in the network, you're going to see enormous corpus-wide data analytics. And what does that mean? So unfortunately, the open data movement to this point in time has largely neglected the government employee as a key stakeholder. And so now with data in the network, you're going to turn that whole equation around, and now that government employee is going to have access corpus-wide, the entire city or the entire county. They're now going to be able to have access to that data so that it can be analyzed. So unprecedented access to the internal data assets that were previously siloed away and entombed and locked and trapped in these underlying systems. Having data in the network is going to promote immense intergovernmental cooperation. So the city and the county will cooperate unlike they have ever done in the past. And I was just in the city of Los Angeles, and I'm already seeing the city of LA and the county of LA start to share data bidirectionally and start to use each other's data in analytical ways to improve the operational efficiency of each independent government. Having data in the network is going to elevate the stature of civic developers. So today, many governments are putting their data online in a portal, and they run these hackathons, and civic developers come out and they build these great applications. But unfortunately, most of these civic developers are hobbyists. They have daytime jobs at software companies and insurance companies and financial services companies, and they're doing this mostly out of their kind of civic passion at night and on weekends, and it's not a very sustainable model. But when you think about the corpus of all this government data in a network, and all that data is standardized, and all that data is wrapped with great consistent APIs from city to city and county to county and state to state, you see how the developer now has a much larger addressable market. Now, instead of just building an application for Kansas City, they're building an application for every city that puts their data online in a format that is standardized. So you're going to see these developers be able to kind of quit their day jobs working for the tech company or working for the financial services company and build businesses around their Civic application. The public servants, the data stewards who are working so hard to plumb the data through the portal and into the platform and into the connected ecosystem and then onto the network, the open data practitioners, you're going to see the stature of these professionals really elevate. These, if you think about it, these are economic development officers and operational efficiency officers in the government, and they are going to enjoy immense stature elevation over the next couple of years as governments go through this multi-year data odyssey. And having data in the network is going to improve the lives of everyday citizens. I like to say, it's impacting the day-to-day lives in citizens in the smallest and the biggest decisions that we make. So I already mentioned transportation as a great example that, instead of waiting on the corner in the rain for an extra 7 or 8 minutes, I can literally get a notification on my smartphone that says, it's time to walk to the bus now because it's going to be there in 3 minutes. But you think about like a big decision like, hey, my family is growing. Our oldest is now 5 years old. We've got a 3-year-old. We've got a 1-year-old. We're outgrowing our little townhome. And now we need to figure out, like, where are we going to buy a new home? And certainly I need to think about, well, how much does the home cost because I have to live within a budget. But I also care about things like how safe is the neighborhood? How good are the schools? How close am I to public transportation? Is there a bike lane in front of my house because I want to ride my bike to work? Well, the source of all that is right here. It's the systems of record. And by plumbing it through and getting it out into the network, we're getting that data to where it's most valuable, having an impact on the daily lives of the citizens. And it's also impacting the day-to-day decisions that you all as government workers are making. So now you're making evidence-based decisions based on facts, not based on gut instinct and intuition like you had to do in the past. And ultimately, when you become a digital, modern, 21st century government where you are making data-driven decisions, where you're making evidence-based decisions, and your data is out in the network where it's most valuable, guess what? The perception of the citizens you serve, the residents you serve, is going to go up dramatically. They're going to be happier. They're going to be more engaged. They're going to enjoy the interactions with governments like they have never been able to do in the past. And so kind of synthesizing this whole concept, what we're doing by taking the data out of these underlying silos and pulling it out through the portals and through the platform and through the connected ecosystem out into the network is we're increasing the value of data for all the stakeholders, the public sector organizations who publish it, as well as the citizens, the researchers, the journalists, the analysts, the developers, the entrepreneurs, and the regular citizens who stand the most to benefit from this government data. So this is the data odyssey that Socrata is so inspired to work on. This literally is our corporate roadmap. Everything that we do, we ask ourselves, does it increase value on the x-axis? Does it increase value on the y-axis? Because that's what we do. That's our roadmap. That's our true North Star. That's what keeps us grounded in how we build our applications and our services.